Hey guys, today I want to talk about a short 7-chapter manga series from the creator of Berserk, Kentaro Miura. That manga is Gigantomaxia. Gigantomaxia is exactly as its name suggests, gigantic, maximum. It's huge, it's massive. This short but epic glimpse into the future fantasy world of Gigantomaxia is a side project from Kentaro Miura that was released in 2013. This 7-chapter excursion into a new story was an opportunity for Miura to take his mind off of Berserk for the first time in 24 years and flex his artistic muscles in a brand new way outside of his already ongoing series, and he really flexes them hard. The attitude of this manga is colossal. Everything about it is just monumental. Even the promo pages are insane with this bulky block font kanji and text. Just look at this art. Like, damn, I could look at this art all day. It's like one day Miura woke up in 2013 and said, well, I'm honestly so tired of working day in and day out on my incredibly detailed, years-long artistic masterpiece. I really need a break from that. And then he continued to go almost harder than he's ever gone in terms of detailed art just for the hell of it. The sense of scale in some of these panels is just insane. It's so dramatic, it's powerful, it's huge. Looking at these panels, I'm really sold on the weight of these encounters and what kind of force is being presented. Not just in the scenes with the Titans, but even in the scenes between the other characters. Miura really uses perspective in a strong way to communicate how much power is being displayed in a scene. The setting is so interesting too. What I love about Gigantomaxia is just how little we know about the world from dialogue, but how huge it feels in illustration. With a story set 100 million years in the future, you've got to assume that most of the world is totally unrecognizable and alien at that point. And it's entirely a mystery due to how unimaginable that amount of time really is. It's a big part of what builds intrigue in Gigantomaxia. When I first read 100 million years in the future, I was like, okay, that's just ridiculous. On a base level, it definitely is. But it follows through with this huge statement in a very confident way. As soon as you get into Gigantomaxia, it's not ridiculous, it's insanely interesting. Within this setting, Gigantomaxia follows the story of our two protagonists, Delos the wrestler and Prom, his companion, who are on a mission of sorts to travel the earth to revive the old gods of the world to their former health. At this point, I would like to say, if you haven't read Gigantomaxia yet and would like to avoid spoilers, definitely stop the video and go do that now. It's only 7 chapters, so it's pretty hard to talk about it without spoiling anything about the story, and I'm going to be talking about basically everything that goes on in these 7 chapters. The manga starts out with Delos and Prom wandering this vast, massive desert. We get this panel of Prom standing atop of Delos' shoulders as he trudges through the sand dunes. Prom is presented as a young girl with odd, sort of regal-looking clothing. She says to Delos that by standing on his shoulders, she is maximizing vision range and protecting Delos from the sun's harsh rays. The way she phrases these things gives the impression that Prom has kind of a strange character to her. Prom retains a somewhat common character type through the story, being the calm and calculated android and or cyborg/alien type of character, complete with the over-extrapolations one would expect from this kind of character. But her relationship with Delos shows that regardless of this, she doesn't entirely lack emotion. In fact, there's regularly a lot of humor in her interactions with Delos. Delos and Prom then come across what is seemingly an oasis in the desert, and Delos excitedly runs towards it, disregarding Prom's warning of the oasis not actually being an oasis, but actually the mouth of a large creature. Delos almost gets snapped up by this creature, and Prom explains that it's a descendant of the anglerfish, which is a type of very deep-sea bioluminescent fish that exists today in the world. This shows that Prom seems to know a lot about the world that they're in, probably a lot more than Delos is aware of. Prom also remarks that Delos always acts before he thinks, which gives us a lot of insight to his character, as well as the dynamic that the two characters share. Our protagonists are suddenly ambushed by a group of people that Delos refers to as the Bug Wrangling Clan, which they have been searching for. He tries to make friends and ease tensions with them, but fails hilariously. The Bug Wrangling Clan then proceeds to capture Delos and Prom as well as the giant anglerfish. As the Bug Wranglers drag Delos and Prom deeper into the desert, we get this beautiful shot of the surrounding area and this massive sand or stone structure that we can assume is the home of the Bug Wranglers. Then we get an even more beautiful illustration as the two enter this massive structure, which Delos refers to as a mountain. Prom replies saying that, in fact, the structure isn't a mountain, but it is the insect's nest. Inside the structure, we see that there is an entirely populated city which resides within its walls, with people and insects living side by side. Prom then explains that the stone-like material is a resinous excretion of the beetles and allows sunlight to pass through it, which allows the temperature and humidity of the inner climate to stay moderate, much like a greenhouse. Prom states that the beings inside this structure are living in symbiosis with one another, different species enjoying mutual gain by the other's presence. She says that the people living here are demi-humans who have evolved alongside the insects to adapt to the desert climate. It's also stated that Delos' tribe, the Hue, called demi-humans the Mew. As Delos and Prom are dragged through the city, the Mew population begin to pelt them with stones and rocks as they are considered outsiders. Prom also mentions here that the Hue continually encroach on Mew land, implying that the differing races are normally at odds with one another. She states that different species can live together to enjoy mutual gain, but this is not the case with man and man. Humanity divides and rejects itself. This is a really important statement for the setting of this story. Even 100 million years into the future, humanity's divisiveness and self-destructive tendencies, unfortunately, live on. Our protagonists are then led into a large Colosseum-like structure which is filled with the Mew people, shouting and screaming at Delos and Prom. One older participant of the crowd even throws an egg at Delos' head. We get this set of panels, and I didn't notice this at first, but seemingly this older Mew woman who throws an egg at Delos is crying. Delos sees this, and we can just tell from the look on his face that it hurts him deeply. I think this is an important set of images, and it really shows that there's a lot of emotion behind why the Mew have so much animosity towards the Hue, and in this moment, Delos can see that very clearly. Prom states that the crowd is engaging in mob psychology, which is basically the idea that when in a large crowd, people tend to do things or act in a certain way that they normally wouldn't act on their own. This is often in situations that escalate to extreme violence, even if the individual members of the crowd aren't inherently violent people themselves. We're then introduced to Ogun the warrior. This guy is a total badass and is obviously ridiculously strong. Visually, Ogun is a very intimidating character. He has a huge warrior's physique and is covered in this thick armor-like insect shell plating, much more so than the other members of the population. Ogun refers to Delos as one of the Empire's dogs and accuses him of trespassing on sacred land. It's clear that Delos is now in a situation where he's to be publicly executed by the Mew on the grounds of being involved with the Empire, a group which we don't know much about, but we can assume a lot based on what the Mew say about them. They've burned down the city, salted the earth, survivors were enslaved, etc. You get the picture. Ogun states that since he's a warrior and Delos likely won't be able to injure him so easily, Delos is allowed to use a spear in battle, showing that even though Ogun hates the Hue and wishes for their death, he is a warrior of honor and has somewhat of a personal code that he lives by. Delos refuses the spear, to Ogun's shock, claiming that he won't need it at all. He takes off his shirt and we just get this great panel of Delos preparing for battle. Just look at this guy's huge body. It's clear by his size that Delos is also a warrior. You can also see that Delos has a good amount of scars on his body. And I just want to make a quick side note here and say I really love the way that Miura draws scarring. He does it this way in Berserk too, with Guts being absolutely covered in scars. And it's just, I don't know, I just love the way it looks. Anyways, Delos takes a few gulps of water and then states his name to Ogun. Etch the name of the man you're about to kill into your heart, he says to Ogun. And he has this really intense look on his face as he stares directly at him. Delos proceeds to take a barrage of punches from Ogun, and we're shown this with some more of that god-tier art from Miura, really showing the weight of the impact of these punches. Delos then grabs Ogun by the waist, and then pulls out a fucking suplex on this guy.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I cannot believe that!
What the hell? I mean, this moment was just wild. This is the moment where you're like, okay, yeah, Delos the wrestler, I got it. That's sick. That's really sick. So Ogun gets his ass dropped and takes this heavy blow to the skull, which shocks him and the entire crowd. Delos then tells him to get up and strike him with all of his anger and pride. This attitude from Delos is just so intense and it really builds the hype so much. Delos proceeds to get his ass kicked a bit more when Prom steps in to tell him that if he keeps taking a beating like this, it'll seriously impede his ability to remain alive, and Prom will not tolerate Delos dying. This is a nice inclusion that helps the reader not completely forget about Prom during the fight, and also shows that Prom either really cares about Delos, or at least needs him to accomplish whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. Delos and Ogun continue to fight until Delos pulls another crazy move by getting Ogun in this insane leg lock, back bend, hold type position. If anyone that knows wrestling knows what this move is called, please let me know because this is crazy. You can tell by this illustration that there's so much force and strength going through Delos' body just to pull off this move, and the expression on his face is just so intense. I mean, look at that. Ogun makes some remarks about how shocked and impressed he is at Delos' strength, and you can tell here that he actually gains a lot of respect for him for how great of a warrior he is. Ogun runs at Delos with the intent to finish the fight and is met with Delos catching the full force of his charge. Delos then grabs at Ogun's waist, pushes against the ground, and flips him upside down in this mind-blowing panel. And shouts, "Grit your teeth," at the top of his lungs before jumping off the ground and completely dropping his entire weight onto Ogun's head in this massive move. This moment was so insane, so hype, so huge, literally mind-blowing. Something about Delos' wrestling style, allowing him to pull off these insane feats of strength and technicality on his opponents, is absolutely awesome and so impressive to me. I feel like this scene hits so much harder than like a really powerful punch or a huge sword swing or an energy blast or something like that. Something about this just feels so real and so powerful in the physical sense. I also love how Delos shouts to Ogun to grit your teeth, assuming he's saying that so Ogun doesn't bite his tongue off on impact or break his jaw on his teeth. I love that sense of sportsmanship that Delos displays by doing that. It shows that he's fighting to fight, not to kill or cripple his opponent. I also want to point out how incredible this artwork is right here. This is just so impressive. Like, this pose is just a crazy thing to draw. I just want to say I really think Miura has anatomy down to a science, and this is a clear example of that. Especially drawing this scene from this angle and perspective, you can really feel the weight of Ogun's body on Delos' shoulder and how much muscle and effort Delos has to utilize to stay stable in this position. I love the moment directly after this, when Delos belts out this insane warrior's roar. It's just like the perfect follow-up, and it's so satisfying. He just dropped like a 250-pound man on his head by employing every bit of strength in his body. What else are you supposed to do right after that other than scream at the top of your lungs? It just sells the whole scene. Okay, so then Delos collapses next to Ogun, who's also collapsed on the Colosseum floor. The crowd of Mew breaks out into a gigantic cheer and rushes to our hero and his opponent, carrying them both above them and cheering them on. This is a great moment because these people were just a few moments ago wishing for Delos' death, but now praise him and Ogun for both being such fantastic warriors. It's like the intense and insane battle and the wild feats of strength displayed were so awe-inspiring to these people that they just completely forgot about their prejudice and hate entirely. And I love that concept. People coming together and putting their differences aside over the love of a good fight. In the next panels, we're shown Prom standing over the exhausted Delos in a small hut after the battle. So this scene, I really didn't know how to approach talking about this, and I really didn't even want to talk about it, but I think it has to be addressed. So Delos and Prom have this dynamic where Delos is the fighter, and Prom has these healing abilities where she can create what she calls nectar, which is some kind of fluid from her body. And in this scene, she administers this fluid to Delos by peeing on him. Delos sort of half-heartedly tries to refuse this treatment, and this is something that he tries to avoid with some remarks here and there throughout the story up to this point, which makes me think that this is a regular thing for them. So it's maybe safe to say that he's not a fan of what's going on here, as he says, "I'm healed, but it feels like some core aspect of my humanity has come to an end." So this is obviously pretty weird. Judging by the expressions on their faces in these panels, this is clearly presented as a joke. I mean, this face is obviously a joke, but I don't know. Just kind of weird. Anyways, Delos spends some time getting to know the bug wrangling clan children, and there's this cute panel with him showing the kids how to do a stretch for a suplex. I really like this scene. I love that slice of life, kind of lighthearted stuff being mixed into an otherwise intense story. So then one of the children approach Prom while holding one of these big beetle-like bugs and asks Prom if she can do magic on it to heal it because its horn was broken. Then we get this set of panels where Prom licks the wounded beetle on the spot where its horn was broken, and its horn becomes instantly healed and grows back, to the amazement of the children. Which leaves me in the same position as Delos here, wondering why exactly the pea thing is necessary. Anyways, Ogun the warrior meets back up with our protagonists, and he too learns of Prom's healing powers. He asks her if she is a Ka, or a spirit. Prom remains a mystery here by basically replying, explaining its exact nature is impossible, but if that's what you guys want to call me, then sure. Then we get this overall puzzled look on the warrior's face, which is pretty funny. Ogun then goes on to ask Delos why it is that he didn't attempt to dodge any of his attacks, speaking about the many heavy punches that Delos just tanked during their fight. To which we get this nice expression on Delos' face as he says, "It's just my way of doing things." Delos explains that where he comes from, he's what's called a gladiator. Every day he's pitted against other warriors in a battle to the death in front of a huge crowd in a massive coliseum. Delos expresses how much he hated to fight with people that he had no personal quarrels with, and that his fighting style of wrestling was to show honor to his opponents, and with that, separate himself from the arena's culture of victor and vanquished. Delos wrestles in the spirit of sportsmanship and the love of fighting in a way that everyone, even the crowd, can appreciate, so that two people can leave the arena alive. Delos tells Ogun that to endure the blows, everyone can live on, and that is what wrestling means to him. Ogun then asks Delos if he ever feels hatred for his opponents, and then we get this fantastic panel where Delos says, "To hate somehow feels like losing. I don't like it one bit." This is one of my favorite panels in the manga. I love the expression on his face when he says this. This is a clear example of Miura's amazing talent to express so much emotional depth with a single panel. With one expression on one character's face, you can draw so much feeling from it. This is probably the most impressive thing about Miura's art, in my opinion. The quality of these very simple, yet very expressive moments. This whole interaction between Ogun and Delos really just further pushes the fact that Delos is that super honorable warrior type, and honestly, who doesn't love that? Ogun then takes Delos and Prom into a massive cavern inside of the city, which is the resting place of the bug wrangling clan's god. Upon seeing this massive being, Prom and Delos recognize it, and Prom calls it part of Gaia, a giant. Prom and Delos knowing exactly what this god is kind of our first look at the main driving force behind our protagonists' actions and their journey together. I thought this was a really cool way to introduce this element of the story, with Delos and Prom just somehow coincidentally ending up exactly where they needed to be. And even then, their intentions weren't outright stated at this moment. The reader still has to kind of guess as to what exactly their mission is and how it relates to these giants of Gaia. Delos and Prom then meet with the clan's elder, who says that they've been watching the duo for the past 3 days. The elder states that they can see through the eyes of the insects, which Prom explains as some kind of electromagnetic network. Prom then speaks out to the elder, bringing attention to the gigantic things approaching from the northeast, which the elder calls the Empire's Titan. Ogun, learning of this, is enraged and is ready to put his life on the line to take vengeance against the Empire. Delos urges the elder to evacuate the people of their clan to avoid being killed by the approaching Titans. It is then explained to Delos that by leaving their home, the Scarabée people will have nowhere to go, with the vast, lifeless desert being their only option. Not only that, but the pride of the Scarabée clan is too strong to just abandon their home to the Empire. Ogun states that they fight and die by their lord. That is their fate. Moments later, the Titans are already at the doorstep of the Scarabée city, and we get this insanely detailed illustration of a gigantic creature that's referred to as the Empire's Great Octopi, which is literally a giant floating octopus creature that can spit flames from its body. This art is just insane and is the starting point to a lot more really crazy illustrations and scenes coming up in the manga. Ogun tells Delos to leave the city and to not get involved in their fight. He says to pass on the tale of the beetle riding people that once were, and he bids the duo goodbye. I think Ogun's really very prideful character comes across really well here, basically just saying, yeah, I know I'm probably going to die for fighting this battle. All my people are probably going to die, but I'd rather die fighting than give up, which really says a lot about how much disdain Ogun must have for the Empire and how much pride he feels being a member of his clan. It's sad, but really admirable. Delos obviously has a huge problem with just standing by and watching as the Scarabée people are being slaughtered by a huge number of these massive creatures, so he runs out to join the battle. We're then shown this intensely foreboding image with the biggest titan approaching from some distance away, and this panel is really just so gorgeous and dramatic. Like, for one single panel of this 7-chapter manga, it must have taken so much work and time and care to draw a scene of this size in such a detailed way. Trailing behind the gigantic approaching Titan is what looks to be some kind of crazy ship built on the back of a massive, strange-looking slug-like creature. We're then introduced to the members of the Empire's military, who we learn has been searching for the Scarabée city in order to decimate its people and recover their sleeping giant, the people's god. With the aid of what they state as the giant Titan that Olympus has granted them, which is somehow under the control by the Empire's Master Oracle, who is this really creepy looking character wearing a mask that resembles the face of the Titan. As the Titan draws closer to the city, Delos and Prom rush toward the battle, sliding down the sides of these giant sand dunes. And so I really wasn't expecting what was about to happen at all, which just made this whole thing so much cooler. It was kind of just like, what the hell is going on? This is insane. Prom expands this life preservation bubble over Delos, and her body like liquefies and stretches over him to form this alien-looking sphere. Then things get really wild as we see Delos inside the Prom sphere, and Prom starts to change the matter around them in order to build this big skeleton-looking structure. There's a lot of really wild physics-based scientific statements from Prom, kind of like a computer checking off tasks in order to execute a program or something like that. The semi-pseudoscience way of expressing what's going on here during this crazy transformation is pretty cool. I think using Prom like that is a great way to express what's happening, and it feels like you kind of do understand what's happening, even if it's definitely not a real explanation at all. It's kind of like there's a reason and a reality to this, and it's not just like, poof, magic, just because it is. The result of this transformation is this absolutely colossal humanoid titan, which immediately grabs the heads of two of the great octopi and, completely overpowering them, crushes them in its hands. There are some absolutely jaw-dropping illustrations of the new titan, which just look so powerful and detailed. It has this intense, muscular yet mechanical sort of look to it. It looks like plated in this massive, heavy armor that stretches over and throughout its body. I love the design of this Titan, and it looks so sick. It kind of reminds me of the engineers from the Ridley Scott film Prometheus. Not only that, but at this point I started to get some huge kaiju film vibes here, as the following panels have this narrator's perspective description of the Titan. Ultra dense muscle woven of carbon fiber and spidroin. Mysterious nectar flows through its veins. Gora, manifestation complete. With this close-up panel of Gora's face, we can see that Prom is inside of the Titan's head, embedded into its forehead, almost like Prom is the power source to the Titan. Delos, transformed into a giant, confronts his humongous adversary in the desert at the end of the earth. I absolutely love these advert-style pages that just hype everything up to an even greater extent. We're dropped back into the battle, and there's another shot of Gora looking absolutely massive. Prom delivers some clarification to Delos and the reader that Delos isn't just controlling Gora, but he literally is Gora, which is a really cool concept, and I appreciate the clarification because it definitely makes it feel distinct from what looks like what's about to be a giant mech fight. Delos Gora begins a full force charge directly at the Empire's Titan in this intense panel, and we get this perfectly timed title drop. Something else that's really notable about this page is this line from Prome saying, "In accordance with the contract, destroy the giant from Olympus." So, this is like the clearest indicator of our protagonist's motives and why this transformation exists in the first place. Delos Gora winds up a massive punch as he charges towards the opposing Titan and proceeds to land what looks like a jet-propulsed forearm slam down on its head, which sends it bouncing off the sand dunes and flying into the air. This panel that shows the action of the result of this impact is just incredible. And we can see the smoke, or what looks like to be flames, coming from the kind of exhaust port on the armor plating of Delos Gora. The Scarabée forces watching from afar are in total shock of this, and they refer to Delos Gora as the Giant of Fire, which confirms that the propulsion system being used is definitely billowing gigantic plumes of fire, which is just so sick. There's a panel of Ogun here seemingly crying, possibly just in sheer awe and amazement of what's happening in front of him. Being a warrior with a love of battle and having faced off against Delos, who has now made this epic transformation in order to protect the Scarabée people, Ogun is probably feeling some intense life-changing emotions in this scene. I just love that he was included in this little cutaway panel because I really like Ogun as a character, and this seems like a clear moment of development for him in a way. With the Empire's Titan downed, Delos Gora performs this massive leap up into the air with the flame propulsion exhaust ports on its calves, and at this moment we just know that the Empire's Titan is about to get totally crushed. The intensity is just ever escalating in this fight, and it's perfect. So Delos Gora comes down with all of his force and weight and slams its body down onto the Titan, continuing to crush and chip away at what now looks like some kind of armor casing over its head. The Titan retaliates at the control of the Empire's Oracle, and it generates these electricity fireball-looking things at the top of its head. Delos Gora takes the brunt of all of these projectiles' explosions onto his body as to protect the Scarabée below from being hit. Prome steps in and reminds Delos that if he takes too much damage, she will submerge his consciousness and take control of Gora herself, reminding Delos that she gets that he's an honorable warrior, but ultimately she's in charge and they have a mission to fulfill. Prome also offers to increase endorphin levels to help with the pain response from the outer layers of Delos Gora's body, to which Delos refuses, saying, "A wrestler takes the pain and turns it into explosive force." Delos is such a badass, and that's all I gotta say about this awesome panel. The Empire's Titan then summons this continuous field of electricity and fire across its head, which Prome calls the Plasma Blade, and it rushes at Delos Gora headfirst. Prome warns Delos that if they make contact with the Plasma Blade, it's likely that they will be cut in twain, and then we get this unbelievable scene. Delos Gora grabs the Titan, taking damage to his abdomen from the Plasma Blade, and flips him upside down. Yeah, we know exactly what's about to happen. This panel is just absolutely jaw-dropping. Like, the first time I read this, it literally brought a tear to my eye. As Ogun shouts from the distance, stunned at seeing the exact technique used on him being used on the Empire's Titan, I just absolutely love that this epic and gigantic fight mirrors the Colosseum fight with Delos and Ogun so well. It really ties the whole thing together in such a beautiful and impressive way. Delos Gora proceeds to jump high into the air while holding the Titan on his shoulders and slams it down into the desert floor onto its head with this insanely impactful panel that finishes off the chapter, complete with the signature gigantic text reading, "Has the skull of the giant caved in?" Once again, I just love the style of that dramatic narration text sprawling across the panel at the very climax. Kind of reminds me of the narration voice that would come in at the end of a really intense episode of Dragon Ball Z back in the day, if any of you know what I'm talking about. The scene cuts to a panel of inside the Empire's Dune ship, showing that the Oracle that was controlling the Titan, slamming face down onto the floor and getting back up without its helmet mask thing, revealing this very alien-looking face and head with huge black eyes and these strange receptacles grafted onto its skull. This kind of shows that as the Titan is damaged, so is the Oracle that was controlling the Titan. We see the Oracle obviously in pain here, bleeding from its eyes and nose, sweating profusely. The next scene starts off with an intense close-up of Delos Gora's face, with Delos asking if the battle was over, to which Prome advises to stay vigilant. We then see the Empire's Titan getting back up from the massive impact that it was just subjected to, and its armor plating over its head is shown crumbling away into rubble as it gets back onto its feet. With the mask-like armor plating now gone, the Titan's face is revealed to be this hideous, grotesque-looking monster with multiple faces, steam and smoke escaping from its head as blood spurts out and drips over its body. This thing just looks absolutely gross, like a pile of shredded flesh that got beaten to a pulp and set on fire. For something that's referred to as a Titan of Olympus, it looks really horrifying. The Titan then turns away from Delos Gora and starts to amble over to the Scarabæ city. Prome states that the Titan is no longer under the control of the Empire, and now its life preservation programming will attempt to take out every life form in the area, including the sleeping giant god in the Scarabæ city. Delos Gora chases after the Titan and grabs it from behind in a master lock, which is also known as a full Nelson. I had to look this up as I was writing this because I just had to know what it was called. In this immense panel, we get some dialogue from Prome ending in Nectar Jet Takeoff, launching Gora. At this moment, I was like, oh my god, what? And Delos Gora launches full force like a fucking space shuttle from the jet exhaust ports on its back and calves while holding the Titan in this lock. I think this blacked out sky that's shown during the whole battle adds such a dramatic feel to the whole thing. Even though they fight during the day, it's almost as if their colossal bodies are blocking out the sun itself. I think this panel really solidified this in such a strong way. Both Titans are launched super high into the air, and I mean like super high up there. And Delos Gora switches his grip on the Titan by holding its arms and pushing its leg into its back. This is it. This panel is it. Just when you thought the manga couldn't get any more intense and it reaches climax after climax, it one-ups itself yet again with this insane shot at the very peak of this epic move performed by Delos Gora with the sun shining in the background. And you've got to remember, the Scarabæ are all watching this happen right in front of them. This is like the kind of thing that's witnessed by people and becomes a legend that's never forgotten for all of eternity. It's like the kind of story that's so huge that it becomes like mythology to explain the existence of gods. The Titans come barreling down to the earth in this gigantic move, which Delos calls Icaros Fall. The jet exhaust ports on Delos Gora's back activate as the Titans are falling, adding an insane amount of force to an already devastating move. The flame billows out from his back in this massive glowing tower of smoke and fire. And as the Titan is slammed down onto the dunes of the desert, a huge crater is created by this incredible weight of the impact. We're shown just how unbelievable the scale of this impact is in this beautiful panel, with the Titan's explosion into the earth taking over the sprawling, outstretched sands of the surrounding desert. Perfectly mirroring the final scene in the Colosseum, once again, Delos Gora lets out a massive roar in strength and victory after downing the opposing Titan. I just wanted to mention here that I think the name Icaros Fall is a reference and possibly a translation to romanization of the ancient Greek myth of Icarus, who dons a set of wings made from feather and wax, but then flies too close to the sun and falls back down to the earth, into the ocean where he drowns. This is a really cool name for this move for obvious reasons, and I think it's just a really appropriate reference to put in here, and it just made a lot of sense. The Scarabæ all cheer and celebrate Delos Gora's victory, claiming in excitement that he is the clan's savior and the desert's new god. There's another very powerful shot of Ogun here just standing in complete disbelief with tears streaming down his face yet again. Yet he wastes no time right after this to continue the Scarabæ attack on the Empire aggressors. The following panel of Delos Gora is this intense, powerful shot of his massive body looking incredibly intimidating, with the following statements from Prome saying, "The complete cessation of target activity has been confirmed. It is over, and Gora is approaching its functional limit." Delos notices the Scarabæ advance on the Empire ships, and Prome states that this was to be expected considering the Empire's atrocities committed against the Scarabæ, and that they shouldn't interfere. Delos Gora then leaps into the battlefield and lands in between the Scarabæ and Empire forces, seemingly protecting the Empire. Ogun looks up at Delos Gora in shock and exclaims, "You mean to put the strength of giants in our way? Aren't you our ally?" And in this moment, Delos Gora is surrounded by a large explosion of ash from its body. This panel depicting Delos Gora's massive body reaching its limit, towering far above the sand dunes, is really impressive. It's illustrated so well with these ink or paint splatters accenting the explosion, and you can really feel this massive puff of ash and dust falling down and covering the battlefield. As this happens, the initial Prome sphere that Delos entered is revealed and falls down to the desert floor. Prome retracts the sphere that surrounds Delos, revealing Delos crouched down in the sand as she stands atop his shoulders. Ogun approaches Delos and questions him on his intentions. We now see Delos in this prostration in front of Ogun and the Scarabée, with his head down in the sand. Delos pleads with the Scarabée and unbelievably asks if you could somehow please let them live, which absolutely shocks and enrages Ogun. Ogun tries to explain to Delos what kind of atrocities the Empire has committed against his people, stating that they've burned down entire cities and villages in efforts to exterminate them, burned people alive, killed children and elders. But still, Delos, bowing in front of Ogun and the Scarabée, continues to beg them not to participate in the violence. So, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First off, as I was reading this, I really felt like Delos was in the wrong here by asking the Scarabée not to fight. I understand that Delos is this very honorable warrior who, at his core, doesn't like violence and doesn't want people to get hurt, but there's clearly no way that he can really understand what Ogun and the Scarabée people have gone through at the hands of their aggressors, the Empire. I know there's that saying, an eye for an eye, but I think what's presented here really goes much further than that. The Empire's army has committed genocide against the Bug Wrangling clan, basically. Delos' mindset here is that, well, more fighting isn't going to fix things. It's not going to bring back the people that have died. Maybe he's thinking, well, what if the people on board these Empire ships aren't even the same people that have killed their people before? So I tend to think, okay, so what if they are? And so what if they aren't? They obviously came here with the intent to kill and wipe out the Scarabée people entirely. Delos is, in his heart, trying to take some kind of high ground in his view of morality, but I think, in a way, it's extremely ignorant of him to step in like this. I feel like it's entirely within the Scarabée's right to take vengeance upon the Empire for their wrongdoings, and the Empire entirely deserves to be punished for what they've done. I see what kind of worldview Delos is so desperately clinging to here, and I really love him for that, but I really just don't think the issue is as simple as he's assuming it is in reality. Maybe that's really cutthroat of me. Maybe you agree. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. So Ogun grabs Delos and pulls him up by his shoulders, shouting at him in bewilderment of his plain ignorance. As Delos gets up, Ogun notices his body is covered in scars. Prome explains to Ogun that when Delos fights as Delos Gora, he takes on all of the damage that Delos Gora is subjected to through his own body. Delos chooses to do this in order to feel Gora's pain, which was what was explained earlier during the battle between the two titans. I'm assuming this is pretty unbelievable to Ogun, and he most likely has a huge respect for Delos' resolve and dedication to his warrior's way. The three are then approached by the village elder, who has overheard Delos' plea. The elder expresses her gratitude and admiration for destroying the Empire's titan, but then argues in defense of the Scarabée's retaliation, again trying to show Delos exactly how horrible the Empire has been to their people, stating they went beyond murder. Every one of them dying once would still not be enough. The elder says in finality that they have the right to vengeance, to which we can see this expression of sadness and disappointment on Delos' face. The elder then gives the order to the Scarabée warriors to execute the Empire's army as they make their advance, and we get this shot of Ogun saying nothing but a quiet and sad apologies as he turns away from Delos. You can really feel the hesitation in Ogun as he turns away. Ogun has a lot of respect for Delos, and you can tell he's so genuinely disappointed that someone as honorable as Delos could somehow not understand his viewpoint as a warrior. It's almost as if Ogun truly wants Delos to see his way of feeling. He wants him to understand the pain his people have suffered and convince him that this is the only way of acting. But there's really no time for them to talk something like that out in this situation, especially if Delos is as stubborn as he is. Suddenly, Prome speaks out to all of the warriors and the Empire's army on the battlefield in some kind of psychic communication, as we see one of the Empire's soldiers say, "There's a voice in his head." Prome introduces herself as the one who vanquished the giant of Olympus with Delos, and says that she's communicating with everyone at once through electromagnetic waves. Prome offers the Scarabée a choice to make. She explains that she's somehow able to control the fate of the giant of Olympus and shows the Scarabée that it's possible that the Titan could either depart the land or possibly take root in it, much like the sleeping Titan were shown in the Scarabée city, which they worship as their god. Prom shows the Scarabée the possible future of the desert in some kind of psychic vision that with the power of both sleeping giants resting in their home, they would bring years of life and prosperity to the otherwise lifeless desert. Prom states that she will allow the bug wrangling clan to keep the defeated Titan, but only on one condition: that they hear Delos' plea and put an end to the fighting. She also says that she would be able to erase the memories of the Empire's army so that they would never return. She speaks out to the Scarabée Elder and asks her to make the decision: the grudges of the past or the revelation of the future. Okay, so there's a lot presented here in just these few pages. Firstly, we see that Prom seems to be way more powerful than what's been shown already. Not only does she have the power to heal wounds and the ability to transform Delos into a Titan, but she's saying that she can also gain control of the felled giant of Olympus that was defeated, possibly in some similar fashion to that of the Empire's Oracle. Not only that, but she also has the ability to erase the memories of thousands of soldiers entirely. So Prom has all of these crazy abilities, like some sort of god almost, and it really builds a lot of interest in her character. Like, I would really love to know so much more about Prom and what exactly is it that she is and why. I also think that this is a really interesting action for Prom to take by offering the Scarabée this choice not to fight. Earlier, she expressed to Delos that it's best if they didn't get involved in what was happening, but clearly here she's had a change of heart. Presumably, she's taking this action as a favor to Delos because she most likely doesn't care about the Scarabée's affairs on a personal level. It shows that Prom cares for Delos and not only his physical well-being, but his emotional and mental well-being as well. I think it's really sweet. On the other hand, I do find it odd the way that it's presented, with Prom offering the Titan to the Scarabée people only if they abide by Prom's one condition of hearing Delos' plea. Once again, I don't really think it's right for Delos and Prom to be asking this of the Scarabée, and they're not really giving them much of a choice, since they're kind of holding this beautiful, prosperous future over their heads. I would like to think that Delos and Prom are the type of characters that, even if somehow the Scarabée refused to listen to Delos' plea and still went to war, Prom and Delos would still be willing to gift the Scarabée with this prosperity. Since they're able to give the Titan to them anyway under their conditional arrangement, I think it wouldn't really make sense to deny them that based on their very personal decision to take vengeance. So the Scarabée are left with this really tough decision, an almost impossible decision to make if you really think of the standpoint of the Scarabée people, and especially from Ogun's point of view. As we see here, Ogun is left in this kind of shocked state, wrestling with the idea of his pride versus the possibility of prosperity for his people, when suddenly his attention is brought into the crowd by this crying baby. Ogun sees the baby and gets this expression on his face as he begins to smile. I think what's happening here is a really powerful representation of this ideology that Delos is adopting, but within the Scarabée people and on a lot more simplified level. Delos' ignorance to the atrocities that the Scarabée people have gone through has been the main point of contention to his pleas of peace. But here we see a crying infant who is obviously just as ignorant, if not more ignorant, of all of the horrible things happening around it in the world. The Elder and the Scarabée warriors are making the decision to go to war with the Empire on the Scarabée people's behalf. But there are likely some Scarabée individuals themselves who adopt the same viewpoint as Delos, especially a Scarabée child who, despite being a member of their clan, can't feel any kind of vengeance for the Empire and doesn't know anything at all really besides that it needs safety. And it's that safety that's being jeopardized further at this point by going to war and at the expense of its future. I think in this small moment, Ogun realizes this and knows which decision is the right one to make, and he puts his pride down for the sake of this baby and future generations, which is definitely not an easy thing to do. The Elder also realizes this as she says to Ogun, "Not even Ogun the Brave can best a wailing child, is it?" Delos thanks Prom, and the Empire is sent on their way. As the Empire ships travel out to the horizon, Delos and Prom stand atop a sand dune as the sun sets. Prom assures Delos that the Empire will never return to the desert, and Delos makes a remark saying, "Surely they'll be able to see Mom again." This gives a lot of insight to Delos' motivation and aversion to killing, and kind of hints at his backstory a bit. Prom asks Delos, why exactly is it that he holds so much value to life? And it's not really a common mindset in the world as it is. To which Delos replies, "Don't you feel the same way? Aren't we trying to bring life to the whole world?" And we finally get this clear message of our protagonist's intentions and the reason why they travel the world in search for the sleeping titans. The two walk off into the sunset to continue their journey, and the chapter ends with some really cute interactions between them, which is a really feel good way to round everything out. We're thrown back into the next chapter with some depictions of these serpent like humanoid creatures seemingly locked into battle with one of the Empire's titans. In just a few pages, we're shown a glimpse of the Empire's malevolence and what they're willing to do in order to obtain these sleeping titans. In this incredibly detailed panel, we see one of the Empire's titans dragging a sleeping titan across the floor of this huge cavern with massive chains, in what is clearly one of the Empire's onslaughts against the Mu inhabitants of the area. The Empire's ships and the great octopi are present in this attack against the serpent people who have been killed and impaled on the surrounding stalactites in the cavern. This short set of illustrations really builds the idea of the Empire's army being so much bigger than what we've seen, and suggests that they're constantly locked in their murderous campaign in search for these sleeping titans. I also can't help but notice that the sleeping titan in this panel is roughly the same size as the Empire's titan, which makes me think that these titans are possibly the same race, and maybe the Empire is using these sleeping titans to turn them into the giants of Olympus that were shown in the previous chapters. But that's just my personal speculation, and the Empire's intentions kind of remain a mystery in this manga. Delos and Prom arrive at the crumbling remains of the cavern and see that they've arrived too late, as the inhabitants of the area have already been killed by the Empire's army. Prom states that, judging by the fungal growth in the cavern, a part of Gaia dwelled there not long ago, which we can assume she's speaking about the sleeping giant we saw in the previous panels. She states that now, with the sleeping giant gone, this place will no longer be able to support any life. We get this really sad set of panels where Delos approaches the corpses of what seem to be a mother and child, and beside them is what looks like a wooden snake toy, which Delos picks up with this very somber look on his face. The very next scene is a set of 3 beautiful panels depicting the surrounding lands, as we can assume Delos and Prom have moved on in their journey. There's a really interesting conversation between the two here, where Delos is asking Prom if the Earth was ever really so full of life before his time. Prom tells him that it's true, and the Earth really was a place of practically overflowing life at some point. There's a lot of really solid world building and exposition to the setting here that's done in a really tasteful way. I think this information is timed pretty perfectly, as we kind of have some downtime while Delos and Prom are just walking across these huge stretches of land, and we see these beautiful images of the surrounding terrain that really sells the idea of the history that Prom is giving to Delos. She says that life on Earth was basically wiped out by a huge celestial event called the super plume, which froze the planet. The stars fell from the sky, the Earth erupted, and the world was covered with ice. Prom states that the one constant in this world is that great cataclysms befall the planet every few 100 million years. Just then, lightning strikes the ocean nearby, and we see this massive swarm of what looks to be some kind of school of flying squid burst from the water, with one giant squid in the center that breaches the surface. Prom says that, even in the face of annihilation, life changes and spreads. She tells Delos that her purpose is to drive biological diversification and promote symbiosis with humanity. Delos kind of looks at her and is like, I don't really understand all that, but all I gotta do is fight the Titans, right? And Prom's like, yeah. At this point, there's another couple pages of just breathtaking artwork from Kentaro Miura depicting the huge variety of landscapes Delos and Prom travel through in this Earth of the distant future. There's a lot of simplicity in these silent artistic panels. We see massive waterfalls, huge stone pillars, gigantic stone statues, and strange yet familiar creatures. The scale of the world is ramped up incredibly in these panels, Just with these pieces of art, the setting is so much more solidified, so much more than any overdrawn exposition dialogue could accomplish. These scenes are really so dramatic, and it's one of Miura's great talents. These illustrations are not only gorgeous, but they make the world seem so much bigger because of the variance of the type of landscapes being presented. It really solidifies the idea that Delos and Prom are traveling across such long distances during their journey. Our protagonists take shelter in this huge, hollowed out shell for the night when Delos notices that Prom seems to have shrunk in size. I kind of love the expression on Delos' face here. It's like Miura is this legendary manga artist who's known for his detailed and intense illustration, but he often uses this classic anime kind of cartoonish humor type of expression on his characters' faces from time to time, and I really think it works so well to drive that humorous attitude. You would think that this might break the mood of a serious story or throw you off, but it actually does the opposite and makes the story more human, relatable, and more believable. So back to the story, Delos remembers that back when they first met, she appeared much more to be that of a young woman rather than a small girl. So for some reason, Prom's body is shrinking, like she's getting younger. Prom quickly explains that this is just a normal way for her to minimize energy consumption, and so is her tendency to sit on Delos' shoulders. So we can clearly see here that Prom, even though she is ridiculously powerful in a ton of different ways, her power isn't limitless by any means. Some time passes, and Delos notices yet again that Prom has grown even smaller, and she takes on the appearance of a very young child. Prom tells Delos not to worry about it again and offers him a drink. There's another very hilarious and expertly crafted pee joke here, and then suddenly, while Delos and Prom are out camping, they come across a creature which Prom describes as a descendant of the tardigrade, which, as far as I know, is like a microscopic creature that can survive in the vacuum of space. So that's kind of cool. This is just another thing to push the fact that the theme of this manga is very big things. Delos immediately gets really excited at the prospect of this creature being food as he rips off his cloak and rushes towards it, shouting, "People have a line," from which they will never back down. Which I'm guessing is him saying that he doesn't want to have to drink pee to survive, so good for him. Delos quickly tackles this horrifying, messed up looking creature at full force, gets his ass kicked a little with a claw to the face, and then proceeds to pull out a fucking suplex on the tardigrade. Delos gets to keep one of the limbs of the creature as a reward as he collapses down to the ground and faints, to which he promptly wakes up and realizes what had just happened, but somehow he's been healed of his wounds. He looks over to Prom in this really hilarious panel to see that she's now basically turned into a baby, and even has like a pacifier and everything because she had to cure Delos again with her pee, I guess. So the manga leaves off on a humorous note here, with Delos and Prom taking off once again to continue their journey. And that is all we have so far in the story of Gigantomaxia. This short manga became a quick favorite of mine for obvious reasons, and honestly, I loved reading it, and I had a lot of fun writing this analysis on it. I would really love to see this manga continue one day because I really fell in love with the story and the setting, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, seeing as how the last chapter was published in 2014, and Miura is still working on his main manga, Berserk, which is nowhere near completion. Not only that, but Miura also has another new ongoing side project called Duran Ki, which was published not long ago in 2019, which is also really good, and I plan to do a video on it soon. Maybe someday, far, far in the future, we'll get more Gigantomaxia. I could see these 7 chapters even being like a solid introduction before the backstory of the characters are explored more in depth. It'd be cool to see the story continue by going back to Delos' personal backstory and how he came to know Prom, as well as a further explanation to Prom and her personal goals, why she travels with Delos in the first place, and just what exactly is her origin. One can only hope. So that's my Gigantomaxia analysis, and if you like this sort of thing, consider subscribing. I'm always open to discussion in the comments, and I love hearing what other people have to think of these great manga. Thanks again for watching.